She wanted me to really talk about three specific topics. These in particular are relatively common. I feel like they do tie back to what we've talked about. And also because of the whole ISKCON 50th celebrations that are going on, I wanted to also bring in that third topic, which we'll get into a little bit later. And so in order to help you with these topics, there are a few exercises to teach you a few new things. Each of them will take about 15 or 20 minutes each. So when we think about accepting the holy name, the idea first is to figure out what accepting means. And generally when we think of the word accepting, if you look it up in the dictionary, you can see two key definitions. Beyond the idea of just accepting something or saying yes to something, it's the idea that you also believe in something. Accepting something means you believe in something. Accepting something can also mean that you take something on yourself. So for example, if you're accepting something, you're accepting an activity, you're accepting a hardship, you're accepting a burden, you're accepting some sort of task upon yourself. That is also another way of accepting this. And so when we look at the holy name, you might remember back to what we talked about, what Maharaj was also talking about with regards to the showing how the holy name is really Nama Prabhu, the person behind, the person that is the holy name. And so when we accept the holy name, we are of course accepting the person that is the holy name. And when we're talking about accepting the holy name, it's not just we keep saying the name, saying the name, saying the name. Because there's a person behind there, it's always needed that we have this element of interaction. We always need to interact with this person that we're calling out to. And so, accepting the holy name also can mean that we're accepting devotional service because the holy name is a person and it's our way of interacting with that person. In one definition of the Mahamantra, kind of like a purporty type thing, Srila Prabhupada has explained that you say, "My dear Radha and Krishna, please engage me in your service." It's a prayer, it's a mood, it's something that we ask for. And so the net result of that is accepting, meaning we believe that will come, and we also take it upon ourselves, that service that might come that we're asking for. So the act of acceptance takes 3 steps. In my mind, it's just kind of looking at it, if you break it down. The first of which is actually surrendering something or offering something. In many cases, in a more mundane example, let's say you accept you can't do something. When you do that, the first thing is you surrender something. You surrender the fact that you can do something in the first place. A more mundane example, I'll get back to it in a minute. And then the next, you give up some sort of decision power or some sort of tendency or something. The next thing you do is generally incorporate that into your life in some way, and then you act in that new way. So when we change this to be accepting devotional service, the first thing we usually do is we have to give up that doership mentality. We have to give up that sense of that we are the supreme. And in doing so, we incorporate that fact that, okay, we're no longer the supreme person in our minds. What does that mean? What does our life look like as a result of that? And then we act in that way to serve what we now realize is truly the supreme. So in the case of accepting the holy name, we accept Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead. We incorporate that understanding into our lives, and then we go ahead and act in that manner, which means subordinate to that supreme. If we look at the example of Arjuna, we see even just before Krishna even speaks the full Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says, Shishyasteham shadimam tam prapannam. Like, I am your disciple now. I accept you as my spiritual master. Please instruct me because you know what's better than I do. And so Arjuna also gives up the same idea of doership. Understands that who he's talking to is someone who will be able to provide him something better than he can. And then accordingly, after understanding the whole Bhagavad Gita, acts in that manner. So if you see, there's a quote over here. The interesting thing is when we actually do this service, it's important to note that this is not something that we're doing it for Krishna's behalf. Krishna doesn't need anything. There's a quote by Srila Prabhupada here, and we'll just read it. It says, Krishna is unlimited. What service can we offer to him? And he has got unlimited servants also. What service he requires from you and me? He's perfect in himself. He doesn't require any service also. But if you're anxious to serve him, then he does not refuse. That is his mercy. That is his magnanimity. So this idea that is, Krishna also does some acceptance of our service, whatever we give to him in some way, the good and the bad, whatever service we give to him, it's accepted in some way. Similarly, when we're receiving service from the Supreme Lord, we should also accept it, the good and the bad, whatever we tend to accept or reject. So, in addition to this kind of definition of acceptance, one other definition that we generally think of is when we accept something, we say yes to that. Now, I don't know how many of you in the room were in Gita Nagari maybe like 12 years ago or 14 years ago or something, but there was a sort of event or some sort of drive or something like that, some topic that we did where we had saying yes to Krishna. And the idea was that no matter what came, we said yes to Krishna. And there was a big Jagannath face, and there was like yes to Krishna shirts and stickers and everything made. So similarly, we're also here, we're accepting the holy name, we're saying yes to Krishna. Now, the interesting thing is we can say yes without saying yes. And we can say no while still saying yes. So I wanted to go through an exercise to kind of talk about that. The main thing is that when we're paying attention to this, is that we see that we'll see in this exercise how that might happen. And so, if you don't mind, get into groups of 3 or 4 with people around you. I'll let you move right now. Just kind of move into groups of 3 or 4 people. Introduce yourselves if you don't know each other. Yeah, you don't need to move the slide right now, so you're more than welcome to go sit. You can sit in the group. You need to speak. I'm asking for exercise, so you can go ahead and sit for now. Yeah, and then I'll ask for your help afterwards. Okay, everybody in a group or so? Okay, so this first exercise is something that if you've ever done improvisational comedy or you've done some sort of like business type event or something like that, you might have done before. But in this case, we're going to take those same learnings and apply them to devotional service. So this first exercise, I'd like you to take a look at all your neighbors. You're going to just tell a story. You don't have to make this super devotional, it's fine. Right now, what we're just getting at is just the idea of what I'm going to talk about. So while telling this story, you will tell it one sentence at a time. First person will say once upon a time, and they'll say some sentence. And then the second person says yes and then continues the sentence based on what the person before them just said. So for example, if I said, once upon a time, there was a blue rhinoceros. Yes, and the blue rhinoceros was in a forest. That kind of thing. So you will say one sentence, then the second person will always start with yes and then continue that sentence. Key thing, don't think about it for very long. Just whatever comes to mind, say yes and then continue on with the story. If you get stuck, which is okay, you can pass. You don't need to get anxiety about not being able to continue a story. Don't argue with what you were presented with also. So if I say there was a blue elephant, or a blue rhinoceros, or whatever, or whoever before you said whatever, accept that. Don't say, once upon a time, there was a blue rhinoceros. Yes, and it was really a grasshopper. Because then you're not really accepting what the person before you just said. And if you do find someone who's doing that, you can go ahead and kind of buzz them. Tell them, hey, try again with the story that I just told you. Okay, so let's take about 5 minutes just to go through that exercise. Tell a story in your circles, one sentence at a time, and at the beginning of each sentence, use the phrase, yes and, before moving on with your story. All right, talk to you in a couple of minutes. Just using yes and. About 30 more seconds. Okay, so if you can wrap up your stories. All right, so thank you everyone. So if we can have someone who has the roaming mic, I think it was maybe, yeah. So that's my timer. Does anybody want to share what that was like? I know the stories are probably silly. I know the stories probably didn't make complete sense. That's expected. But talk to me a little bit about what was easy about it, or what was hard about it?
We were trying to say yes and, but what happened was we ended up saying yes but. So
Yeah, that's a common thing. What happened to your stories when you said yes but?
it went in the opposite direction. So then we had to continue from the opposite direction. So
Okay, good.
yeah.
Thank you.
On the similar lines as Shatrupa Mataji shared, the mind was going in a direction where it was trying to find some mistake and say yes, and also at the same time having this phrase yes and at the back of the mind, it was also trying to make a connection. So that was the very difficult part of it.
Sure, thank you.
I found it was easy for me to flow in the story when I became playful about it and not trying to keep it logical and sensible. So it was actually a lot of fun and very easy.
That's an important point, because even while saying yes and you're trying to come up with something, you can still say yes, but this might make more sense, and so I'm going to say that. And so you can still negate something while saying yes. That's the important part here. So let's actually bring in these two other phrases right here to see how the story changes. We're going to do this again. Now, with the group of 3 or 4 of you that are in the group with you, assign each other one of the roles. Role 1 is yes and. Role 2 is yes but. And role 3 is no. If you have 4 people, maybe the 4th person can get on to yes and or yes but or something like that. Go ahead and try telling your stories one more time. Each of the roles can only say what their role is. So for example, if I'm the yes and person, I can only say yes and then continue my story. If I'm the yes but person, I say yes, but, and then I continue my story. Make sense? Whatever comes up. There's no limits on this one. So again, it's just about the exercise of just going through and seeing what it's like to say yes and, yes but, etc. Okay? Talk to you in a couple minutes. And make sure there's one no in your group. Make sure there's one no person in your group. I mean no, and then you continue the story. About 30 more seconds. All right, finish up your stories, please. All right. So, can we have Advaita turn? Can we have some people maybe talk about how this was a little bit different than the exercise you just did before?
I'll try. When we were doing the yes and the yes but, those were more coming out to be negative, and the person who was doing the no was kind of trying to be more justified in the whole action she was taking. It kind of became very weird, the whole flow it came out to be. And then in the end, what I other thing noted was the yes and person was lonely. Yes but and yes no had the same theme going against your mom.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I realized that no is a very strong and, in a more of a negative sense, it make me felt stronger and felt I can cut that to the other person and kind of demeaning, and it doesn't, it feel very powerful,
Sure.
but in a
sure.
negative sense.
How many stories do you feel like you actually told?
We told 2 stories, but I always cut her off, I just denied her feelings and whatever she was saying, so I denied.
Sure.
Like,
So
never
for the,
happened.
can we have someone else who was a no in their group maybe talk about their experiences? Oh.
So I was the no person. The first storyline, it was difficult to say no because they were just telling about how merciful this event is and how merciful is Maharaj's classes. Then I had to change the whole storyline. But initially it was a little difficult, but then it became, when I went into the role of just saying no, it was just easy to just cut off without even listening to what the other person is saying.
That's an important thing. For the people who were yes ands or even the yes buts, do you feel like you had to listen more? You can just nod, it's fine. For the people who said no, were you even listening?
I was the person saying no. but it was very easy for me because I keep saying it to my daughter, to my husband too, so it was easy for me. I was enjoying.
All right, thank you. So you can see that just by changing how we react to one of these sentences, a story that you're given, all of a sudden changes everything. We just changed it from yes and to maybe even yes but, or just switching it to no. And just see how powerful that no is. When you were doing the yes ands, do you think that any one of you individually could have come up with a story like that? Head shakes are good. You think you could have? So the question is, when you were doing the first exercise with just saying yes and, the resulting story that you created, if you were to just be yourself alone and had to write a story on your own, do you think you could have written a story like that before? Seeing a mixes of yeses and no, which is fine. But part of it is, when you're looking at someone else, you're listening to what they're saying,
Speak.
and then you're building off of that as well.
Cannot speak now.
You have a question, sir?
Yeah, I wanted to say the importance of no. I'm a writer. I've been writing since my childhood and write the poetries also. The no word is, I know some Mataji says very strong, but in the writing, without all these three, yes, yes and, yes but no, without that, the poetry is incomplete. Because lot of things in the world are yes, lot of things are no. So all the three phrases is important for a writer.
That's correct. There is a need for all three of these things. However, when I'm talking about what, in this context, what I want to bring it back to is the idea of accepting devotional service. When we accept devotional service, we can say any of these three things. We are all welcome and more than free to do so, but it'll end up being one of them. So when we end up receiving some sort of devotional service, we can say yes, yes Krishna, and I'll do it to the best of my abilities. We can say, yes Krishna, but can you give me like 10 more people, 3 more weeks, $100 more? Or we can say, no, I can't. I'm not able to, I won't do it, something along those lines. And this is where the power of that no comes in. It's all three are very valid and reasonable options from time to time. But in the realm of devotional service, we're shifting from being able to choose any of them at will and trying to start thinking in the sense of accepting. That's the idea of accepting devotional service. We're saying yes, and then we'll do it to the best of our abilities. We may not end up succeeding in our minds, whatever that may look like. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've actually failed. That's a big difference, because what we think may be failure is still a great learning opportunity. And you can still say, yes, I've learned from this, and the next time that something like this comes along, I know what to do, or I know what I can do a little bit differently. So that's accepting whatever we received, whatever we're given. Okay, so I want to make sure I don't run out of time. Okay, yeah, so the next section, please. Yep. So when we're talking about obstacles in devotional service, this kind of relates back to what we were just saying. So we say, yes, fine, great, bring it on. And then this happens. So something inevitably goes wrong. Something inevitably is an issue. I mean, look around you, we're in the material world, I'm sorry, but obstacles will happen. But what if we reframe the obstacle in the first place? So if we take a look at this quote from Queen Kunti's prayers, we see Queen Kunti had a lot of obstacles. I even put an ellipses in there because there's more in that quote. And then she asks for more obstacles. Normally when we think of obstacles, we're thinking, no, we don't want anything. We want this road to be nice and smooth. I want to go straight back to Godhead. Great, easy. But we're living in a world where we have obstacles. It's not realistic to imagine a world where the road is just paved with gold and there's nothing in the middle of it. The road back to Godhead is not an easy one, obviously. It's easy, but it's difficult at the same time. The reason for that is just partially dependent on how we're viewing the obstacles in our devotional service. So if you see this picture, actually is of myself from Mayapur in 2006. This mridanga player that you see is completely blind. He's a fantastic mridanga player. I still remember it 10 years later. And one thing that I wanted to bring up is because you see a blind person, blind mridanga player, a blind person walking around. Imagine there was someone in a room and they were trying to walk around and they're blind. They're bumping into things. They're bumping into the bed. They're bumping into like a chair that's sitting around or something that somebody left on the floor. It could be that the blind person can consider these are obstacles. I don't know how to get out of this room. I'm stuck in this room and I keep bumping into things. What's going on? I want this room to be empty so I can find the door and just get out of here. But what if instead the blind man just considered this opportunities to explore his environment over there? This is instead the blind man going into everything and seeing, oh, what is this? Oh, it's a bed. Oh, what is this? Oh, it's a chair. And exploring the room that he's in. It's allowing him opportunity to explore. Every single thing that he bumps into, he expresses a sense of interest into it. Being interested in what he just ran into. No longer are they obstacles. There's something interesting to explore. The point is then he doesn't actually need to worry about leaving the room. He's just more interested in the exploration itself. So if we take this back into Krishna consciousness, we sometimes think, okay, if only I had 50 more people, we could go out and do Harinam Sankirtan every day. And to some level, that is true. You need at least like 2 or 3 people. Sometimes, like it makes sense. However, when we're looking at just in general obstacles, a lot of times we keep thinking of them as barriers. If we didn't have X, then we could do Y. But if we don't consider X as an obstacle, but rather something to explore, that's a little bit different. So when Krishna sends obstacles, and he will, again, we're in the material world, we should accept them as devotional service, whatever it is. They're all opportunities to surrender, whatever the obstacle may be. Whatever the issue that might come up and the issue that we receive, we accept them like we talked about in the previous section. And then we also explore how can we better use this obstacle in some sort of way back to services of Krishna. So if we go into an example like of cooking, you saw that picture of Srila Prabhupada cooking before. We accept the fact that we have to clean pots after we cook. I mean, I don't like doing it, so that's an example I like to use. But I like cooking. But at the same time, I have to realize that, okay, along with cooking, this service that I may be doing, there's also the service of washing pots. Not so great, in my opinion. I wish somehow magically they were done. But at the same time, we'd still have to accept that and realize that, okay, this is an activity in time management, this is an activity in knowing fully well how to utilize the act of cooking in service. They're both pieces of the service. Both are necessary. You cannot have one without the other. And so it's a matter of acceptance. Because we're on the path of trying to get back to Godhead, we will end up with obstacles. Whatever obstacles we do meet, we should say yes to and should be happily exploring what they are. Part of devotional service is also exploring, hey, this is something that's come up. We're doing anartha nivritti for the vast majority of us. The longest part of the line of devotional service. What does that mean? It's you're clearing out anarthas. So if you find an anartha, if you find some sort of obstacle, you find some sort of issue, come at it with interest. Don't think, oh, I'm such a bad person, I'm so horrible, I don't know how to actually do X, Y, and Z. If only I had Y, then I would be able to do this. that isn't necessarily accepting what you've been given. We're supposed to say, yes, and let's take a look at it. It's difficult. It's extremely difficult work. I completely understand that. However, it's very needed. So, what I want to do is actually talk about this and go through another example exercise. Take a couple minutes to yourself and just talk about this first question on the bottom here. So, what is an obstacle you've been facing in your devotional life? Just take 2 minutes to think about just that one question. Don't think about how to solve it. Don't think about how long you've been dealing with it. Nothing of the sort. Just think of the obstacle. Take a minute. Did anyone not think of an obstacle? Because if you did, I mean, come see me. I'd love to talk to you. Now, turn to your neighbor, just one of them. If you're alone, you can be a group of 3, that's fine. But just talk to your neighbor and talk about the second question. Talk to them about the obstacle if you're okay with sharing. You don't have to use the extreme details if you don't want to. But just maybe start thinking about how can I reframe this as something of interest or something that I can explore instead of just considering this an obstacle. Okay? Let's take about 2 or 3 minutes. Turn to each other. Go ahead and talk it out. Okay, another 30 more seconds. All right. So, anybody who's willing to share a little bit about what you talked about, what maybe your obstacle was, what kind of resolution you may have come to, what kind of topics you discussed. Sure. So the question is, anybody who's willing to share what you guys talked about in your groups, what your obstacle might be, what you talked about, what the reframing might be, what the resolution might be, etc. Whatever you may want to talk about.
Yeah, so we talked about how to see obstacles as an opportunity to grow. So he was just telling about his experience that how do we actually see obstacle as an opportunity. So we thought about how we can see two scenarios. So the first thing is that where we are and where we want to be, and the obstacle is in between. So if we see it as a stepping stone, then it becomes an opportunity. In all the other cases, it's like a load or a burden on our heads. So that's something that we discussed.
Sure, thank you. Other groups?
We discussed how we can, we get interested, how we can see obstacle as a Krishna mercy or arrangement in our life. At least for me, it's both down to the experience, because in the starting, we never had experience where obstacle can have, see as a Krishna arrangement. So I will say for a long time, it was not happening, but after few years, when you look back, then you see yourself where you've reached or how you're growing in a very subtle level. Maybe it may not be visible. That time you can realize, oh my gosh, this was Krishna arrangement, because Krishna wants me to understand these things. Then I thought this helps to see. Otherwise, for so many years, I couldn't able to understand this was Krishna arrangement. I couldn't able to accept, I will say. But over the period of time, when you look back, then you realize that it has a different impact.
How many of you have heard the phrase, hindsight is 20/20? I mean, it's a pretty American English phrase. Hindsight is 20/20. So what it means is that when you're looking back, you have perfect vision. Because you can't change it, it already happened, and so you obviously know what happened. And so very similarly, it's very easy to go back and think, okay, yeah, this is a great learning opportunity. Now the difficulty is doing that while it's happening.
There must be something there, that's give you hope for the future.
Sure. So that's the difficult part, right? I mean, I'm sure, as you were mentioning, it's something, it takes a long time, it takes effort to actually start rethinking of something that you are dealing with as some sort of opportunity or some sort of arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead you're trying to serve. Because you may think, oh gosh, this is something absolutely terrible.
For me, this is really a nice experience, as I've been thinking about that as an obstacle, but I couldn't really pause and see what is that I can do. And especially the second question, even when Radhati Mataji asked me to share, I wasn't ready, because I was like, I don't know, how can I see that as a mercy? And just in that thought, when I started thinking about it, I could really see that's an arrangement, and sort of for me to depend more and then not doing things in a doership mentality. I'm thinking that's the Krishna's arrangement for me. It's really nice and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so much stuff to cover. All right, if we can move to the next section. Thank you all very much. This last section is actually taking everything that we've just talked about and putting this into practice. So we've practiced a little bit about accepting things. We've practiced a little bit about reframing them a little bit. Now we're going to be talking about implementing them into our lives. So what we want to do is, if we can break into maybe 7, maybe 14 groups. Try to kind of split yourselves accordingly. 7 or 14 groups, I don't know. No, number of groups is 7. Sure, that might actually work better. All right, so we'll do it some school-fashioned way. If you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly count you off in a group into 7, and then you'll be in a big group with each other, okay? You just say, when I point at you, just say a number, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc., etc., etc. Okay. One, yep. Oop, back there. 6. Nope, 1. Back there if you'd like. 3. Some of you didn't count over there somewhere. 3, okay. 3 seems right. 7. Perfect. Women, please. 7 groups. Men. Perfect, guys. 7 groups. You may have only 1 or 2 people in your group, especially on the guy side. Right. Close enough is good enough. It's fine. Wherever groups you're in is fine. All right. If you don't know each other, please introduce yourselves after I finish speaking. All right. So, you may think, oh no, I don't know the 7 founding rules of ISKCON. Good for you, is I've written it on the board, so it's fine. You may also think, oh no, I can't read that really small font. It's okay, I've summarized it for you in a big color in the top. So, what I want you guys to do is the number of your group. Take a look at that number. Take a look at that founding principle, the purpose. And I want you to discuss in your groups that question at the bottom. How can I be more effective in implementing this in my life? Take a look and remember, you talked about yes-anding things. You talked about accepting something. You talked about reframing obstacles. Yes? No. Each group is going to process only one purpose. And the purpose number that you're going to process is the group number that you're in. So for example, if you're group 4, you're going to talk about purpose 4. That's it. You're working together. Okay? So let's take about 5 minutes. Sorry. 5 minutes to talk about this within your groups. Again, introduce yourselves if you don't know each other, and we'll come back. You can move forward if you can't see also. I made sure to put the full text in there in case you wanted to reference it in there. Just kidding, like 1 more minute. All right, like 30 more seconds. Okay. All right, so because we only have 3 minutes, let's see. Does anybody, the people who are in group 1, does one group want to share? Any of the group 1s?
We were saying, we were discussing how if we come to understand that we have imbalances in our own life, kind of coming to the realization that our life, there are imbalances in our life, and how spiritual knowledge can help us check these imbalances and provide, real values to our life, then it will help us express those same values and ways to overcome these imbalances to others.
Thank you. All right, any of the group 6s? 6.
So number 6 is develop simple living. And the ideas we came up with, well, to be effective, first of all, we need a good understanding of what Prabhupada meant by simple living. So we want to make sure that everyone is well-versed in Shastric understanding of what it means to have simple living. And then we went to a more practical level, saying things like, observing different farm communities that are already established and see how we can, in our own small way, take some part of that. Because obviously we can't just manifest a whole farm community, but something like, some devotees even do it, like just try to grow your own crops at home, your own vegetables or something like that. And did I miss something? I think that's kind of how far we got.
No problem. Thank you. I know it was a very short time. So just a show of hands. Did you realize that you were saying yes and to people, or yes but, or no to people while you were discussing your activities? Just raise your hand if you thought you'd recognize that. Okay, that's fine. It's okay if you didn't. Did you maybe raise your hands again now if you think that you saw an obstacle and then somehow reframe that to be something that was actually useful when trying to implement this? That's a lot more difficult, I understand, but great. Okay, so the point of that is also then to take a look at these 7 purposes of ISKCON and seeing, okay, this is implementable, this is possible, because we're accepting what we've been given, we were assigned a group, we're accepting that. We're accepting what the people around us have been saying and building off of those ideas. And then we're also taking a look at any obstacles that come up and trying to reframe them in a way such that that doesn't get in the way of us trying to implement that. Okay? I'm going to quickly summarize. Okay. So this is my last slide. I just want to summarize all this for you because I think it's some exercises that you can take back home. You can do it by yourself. This is not something you absolutely need to be at the Festival of the Holy Name in Chicago to do. You can go back and it's like sit down, okay, think, okay, what things have I been given? Yes, I accept them. What things have I been given and what do I don't like? What obstacles am I seeing? Okay, how can I reframe that? And then finally, how can I actually put this in practice in my life? Whatever it may be, something small, something big. So I just wanted to take you through these exercises to at least give you a sense of what to do, some activities that you can take by yourselves when you're going back, trying to remember all these really great topics that we've talked about this weekend, and trying to put them in practice in your life as well. So as Maharaj said during the discussion thing, what's your Sankalpa statement? When you're writing that down and trying to put that into actual practice, because the intention is just one piece of it, it's actually putting it into practice that's the other piece. When you're trying to do that second piece, think about this stuff as well. Okay? I'm way over time, sorry. But if you have any questions or comments or anything else, you're more than welcome to ask Maharaj first. And if you have anything else, you can ask me, of course. All right, thank you. Hare Krishna.